All right. Thank you so much for that introduction. So, can everybody hear me and see me? Hello, hello. Okay, it looks like in the chat box, everyone is able to hear me and see me. So that is wonderful. I'm very excited to be here with you all today. I am here in the United States in Maryland. And as you can see, I work at George Mason University, which is in Fairfax, Virginia. And I can see that we have participants from all over the world right now. And I would just like to first say thank you so much for joining us. And I hope that not only will I be able to share some information and thoughts about information literacy, but that also you will be able to share some of your thoughts as well. So please don't be shy in the chat box. So the first thing I'd like to say to introduce this topic is that you we're here to discuss a concept in a term called information literacy. And if you're here, you probably already know that information literacy is a necessary skill for young learners in the 21st century, which is increasingly image, media, and technology driven. And in the past, literacy may have just referred to being able to read and write, but the term literacy now includes the interpretation of all kinds of information, whether print or images, video, audio. And so I'm going to put up a slide where you can see the P21 framework for 20% tree learning. And you can see in this framework, which comes from here in the United States, um, that information and literacy is one of the important skills, but you'll also note that it is included in information media and technology skills. And so we will talk about this a little bit later, quite often. Uh, Information literacy is um, always spoken about related to digital literacy skills or media literacy skills. In case you were interested in seeing another important framework, this is from assessment and teaching of 21st century skills. And this originated in Australia. And you'll see here in this framework, uh, 21st century skills are conceptual into ways of thinking, ways of working, tools for working, and ways of living in the world. These are quite similar skills that you will see in the partnership for 21st century learning or P21. but it's conceptualized in a little bit of a different way. And here you can see that uh, information literacy is under tools for working. And again, you'll see that this includes information and communication technology, literacy skills. So as I mentioned before, information literacy is not easily separated from other types of literacy. And our students will need these tools for handling information from so many different sources. Most of all, sources through the internet. internet and social media. So I'm sure you are well aware that this can be very overwhelming and difficult. Through globalization, we are communicating with others like never before. We are sharing information like never before. And what we've come to find out through this rapid globalization is that our world is rapidly changing. And what we knew to be true yesterday, or even things we believe today, may not be true or valid tomorrow. Therefore, I think this quote, which I love, really hits at the point that I want to make today for information literacy. So, in terms of literacy, let's consider what Alvin Toffler, the futurist, said. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So this is an aspect of information literacy we should keep in mind through this whole webinar. We're trying to help our students build skills to interpret and use information while being ready not just to learn something new, but to be open to unlearn and then relearn information. And that's actually one of the hardest things. If you're like me, it can be very hard to unlearn something that I believe firmly is the truth. But because our world is rapidly changing, this is such an important skill. All right. So before we go further, I have a question for you. And so before we go further, we should probably have a definition of information literacy to start with. So let's brainstorm for a second. Can you write any words, phrases, or sentences into the chat box? When you think of information literacy, what do you think of? What is information literacy? Okay, Dua Aslam, I see reading skills, decoding true or false, digital literacy, to be able to communicate with anybody in the world, synthesizing, evaluating information. Yes, I see we are thinking along the same lines, connecting fields, finding sources, maybe to know how to distinguish between what's true and false. Excellent. Ooh, understanding how technology works too. Thank you, Lisa, and hello. Media literacy. Okay, oh, decoding visual stimuli. All right, so I think all of you have come to the right place, because all of your ideas are things that we're going to be talking about today. Now, if we want to take a look at a definition, here is one official definition of information literacy. This comes from the American Library Association, and it says, the American Library Association defines information literacy as a set of abilities requiring individuals to recognize when information is needed and have the ability to locate, evaluate, and use effectively the needed information. And you'll notice the date on this. This came from the Presidential Committee on Information Literacy, but that was in the last century. And what I can say is that this task has become increasingly complex in our global information society. So as you know, in this day and age of fake news, it is more and more difficult to know how and why information is created and presented and disseminated. Our students not only need to know how to use technology to access information, that was something somebody wrote in the chat box, but they also need to understand and critically evaluate information, which is also something I saw some of you typing into the chat box. Our goal is that they become skilled information consumers, if you will, and also ethical and thoughtful information creators as well. So it goes both ways, right? Literacy, reading and writing. It's also consuming, interpreting information, as well as creating information and putting it out there into the world. And so why is information literacy so important? Well, it's just what I was trying to emphasize before, right? 21st century students need to acquire the skills to appropriately access, evaluate, use, manage, and add to the wealth of information and media they now have at their thumbs and fingertips. This is so important, right? They need to be able to learn how to handle massive amounts of information and media and technology that's accessible 24/7 through the use of mobile devices. Right, so it's interesting to me that this exploration of information literacy began with the American Library Association. If you think about the access of information for us, quite different in the previous century. In some cases, you go to the library to do your research and to find information. And then you'd have to maybe, well, if you were like me when you were little, you would look it up in a little card catalog to find a book with the topic that you wanted, and then your librarian might help you go find it on this shelf. But now it's at our thumbs and fingertips, right, on our mobile devices here. So we need to make sure our students can handle this massive amount of information. All right. Oh, I really like what Vera Verena said. Without it, we can't study and communicate. Absolutely. All right, so now I have another question for you. Why is information literacy important for English teachers? I think we all agree this is important for our 21st century students. But why is this important for English teachers? Please take a moment to write any words or phrases or sentences into the chat box. Ooh, majority of information comes in English. To teach yourself and others. Libraries are still important. I agree, William. Libraries are still important. We shouldn't forget about them. Libraries are changing now, though, in terms of the types of resources they provide. Creativity is everything. Thank you, Peter. To stay up to date. We want to stay up to date. Oh, the use of English in all types of media. Simone and Radu, thank you. Okay, so for English language teachers, one thing we might want to consider is the amount of information online that you can find, because we're talking about accessing all this information through the internet and social media. I always like to check in with this source, w3text.com. There, w3text.com, they do all kinds of analytics on information in the World Wide Web. That's why it's W3Text. There you can see what are the top widgets, what are the top social media outlets around the world. One thing they analyze is the languages found online. And you can see here that the majority of the information on the internet is still English. When I first started to look at this information a long time ago, I think there was probably more than 52.3% of the information online is in English, but now there's a much more diverse range of languages that you can find in the World Wide Web. But the point is here that um, if we're English teachers and we're teaching our students how to use the English language in a real and authentic way, we do have to recognize the fact that our students will be accessing information that is in English, and therefore they need the skills, these information literacy skills, then to go along with how they learn to read and write English. So, as I know that many of you are well aware of this, but hopefully this information is the specific information from w3text.com is actually useful to you. And if you want to go there and look up your native language and see how it is doing on the World Wide Web, then please go and take a look. All right, so now we're to the point where what are some specific information literacy skills? After this, we're going to look at some activities that you can use in the classroom with your young learners. But let's talk about the actual skills. Some of you have mentioned them when we were previously brainstorming. Go ahead and write into the chat box. Oh, resourceful, critical thinking, very important. Thank you, Marisar. Knowledge of using ICT. Okay. Oh, recognize signs, read and write and analyze. Thank you, Vera. Knowledge, or see it. To choose correct information. Thank you, Elena. Sourcing information, interpretation, assessing the sources, credit worthiness. Yes, Medi, very important, and we will talk about that. All 4 skills plus the ingredients. Word choosing, digital skills, critical failed skills. All right, so we're touching upon the skills, and I think it's important for you to see 2 different sources for information literacy skills. And it might make you think about how you approach teaching information literacy in the classroom. Okay, so the source for this one is the Partnership for 21st Century Learning, which you can find, of course, at p21.org. So I'll just put this in the chat box in case you want to go and try and access it. So information literacy skills are considered, of course, accessing and evaluating information. So the idea is that students will be able to access information efficiently, right, quickly, and effectively, meaning they will be able to know where to go access, what sources to access for good, reliable, valid information. In addition, they need to be able to evaluate information critically and competently. And we'll talk about those skills. In addition to that, students need to be able to use and manage the information. So use it accurately and even creatively for the issue or problem at hand. We want them to be able to manage the flow of information from a wide variety of sources, right? Helping them weed out the things that are not so important. Also, to apply fundamental understanding of the ethical and legal issues surrounding the access and use of information. So this comes maybe when they're more skilled and they're actually creating information and putting it online. So in the 21st century, we know that everyone's level of information literacy and fluency will need to rise, whether at work, in school, at home, or in the community. There will be increasing demands for our information literacy skills. One aspect that I thought was interesting is being able to also, this ethical and legal issues, maybe giving credit to the sources of information that you use when you create things. So even the source of images should be offered when presenting information. So because of time, we're not going to be able to focus on all of these aspects. And as you saw in the webinar description, we'll be focusing on our young learners' ability to interpret various forms of information while learning English, but I thought it was good for you to see how information literacy skills are defined. I wanted to also present to you the 7 pillars of information literacy from Scono. And if you're not familiar with Scono, this is the Society of College, National, and University Libraries, and that represents all libraries in the UK and Ireland. And I thought this would be helpful too, because this is actually a model that is used often when talking about information literacy. So this might be at a higher level because we're talking about universities, but at the same time, this is where we're headed, right? So we're trying to make sure students eventually are going to learn all of these skills, these 7 pillars: to recognize the need for information, to distinguish ways in which the lack of information can be addressed. So it's not just finding information, but being able to distinguish lack of information, build strategies to locate the information, locate and assess the information, compare and evaluate the information obtained from several sources, order, apply, and communicate information to others in an adequate fashion, and to synthesize and add to the existing information, contributing to the creation of new knowledge. So this is kind of like the trajectory. This is where we want our students to end up. Okay, so now I also wanted to add that according to Scono, information literacy is an umbrella term which encompasses concepts such as digital, visual, and media literacies. And so we're going to kind of talk about all of these together. In some cases, information literacy is actually referred to as digital literacy or media literacy. So regardless of the terminology you use, be it digital literacy or media literacy, having information literacy skills are the fundamentals to be successful in digital space. Okay, so that's how I want you to conceptualize it. Understanding how different types of media are used to communicate messages and how to choose from the many media choices now available, and how to create effective messages in a variety of media are also important. And so because actually, communication in the 21st century requires skills not just to interpret information, but knowing all of this about the digital space and media and visual literacy. We also need to make sure we are working on helping our students to interpret visual information. And in fact, visual information um, is connected with text now. You really can't separate it out. And so we need to make sure that when we're teaching reading and writing, we're also looking at visual information. I mean, if you think about it, visual information is a huge part of our daily lives. Think about how often you look at or use all of these things. Photos, videos, right? Are you looking at magazines, advertisements, websites? How about tables, maps, signs, charts, graphs? All right, yes. So basically, we are absolutely bombarded by visuals all day long, and they are often associated with the text that we're reading. And so this is one reason why we really can't separate this when we're teaching our students. In fact, the information we take in is 80 to 90% visual. This comes from brain-based research. In fact, nearly 30% of the brain's cortex is devoted to visual processing more than the other human senses. We are very visual beings. Um, do you recognize this image here? Okay. So this is from prehistoric times. It's the last Scout cave in France. This is from over 17,000 years ago. And so if you think about it, we as humans are sort of hardwired to be communicating with each other through visual images. And so it's really a natural part of being human, and we have to recognize the fact that we are using these visuals to communicate with each other. In fact, I know we're teaching English and text, but brain-based research also shows that we read non-text 60,000 times faster than text. So if you're using authentic materials that combine both text and visuals, your students are really reading those visuals much more quickly than they're reading the text. Therefore, we really need to think about how do we build skills to help our students interpret that visual text. So no longer are we presenting text like this. Okay, maybe we did before to teach reading, but not anymore. This isn't really how we present text and information. In fact, if we look at more authentic uh, reading materials, we'll see that it's presented more like this. And with text, right? The use of things like information graphics, right? And visuals that are laid out in a way to help you understand the text. All right, so um, this is why more and more important to be able to present text in this way. This mirrors authentic readings. And you can see here that how visual literacy is entwined with learning how to read. And this is all what we mean about information literacy, right? So here you can see these information graphics. You can see even the use of color now is very important for interpreting information, right? And so use of color and photos and imagery is all a part of becoming more um, literate in this image and information based communication. So, um, the first tip I'll give you in terms of information literacy is to make sure you are exposing children to all types of information graphics and graphic organizers. And if you use more authentic materials, then you will see that it is, of course, interwoven with All right. Oh, I see, William. Not only for children, absolutely. So one of the things that is important is this information literacy so important for all of us. And hopefully there's ways you can engage your young learners in building information literacy skills as well. So here is where I also want to bring up the term critical literacy. So it is no longer enough to simply read and write. Students must also become literate in the understanding of visual images. Our children must learn how to spot a stereotype, isolate a social cliche, and distinguish facts from propaganda. Analysis.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joan.
Important.
Thank you all for attending. I hope this hour you found it as interesting as I did. It really flew by. So I'm so happy you all could join